My guest is Mik Lemieux. He is the executive director and wealth planner on the Athlete Center of Excellence team with JP Morgan Wealth Management. Mik, how are you? Thanks for joining me on Sports Business Radio. Great to have you.
I appreciate it, Brian. This is going to be a great conversation. Really appreciate the chance to be here.
Yeah, so I always love to start with talking to our guest about their background and their path to how they got to where they are now. So obviously you are the nephew of Mario Lemieux, hockey great. You come from a great family. You were an athlete yourself. How did growing up around that family, being an athlete yourself, kind of help you get to the stage you're at right now?
I mean, I kind of joke. I feel like I kind of was born with a hockey stick in my hand, or at least was forced onto the ice pretty early there, as were most of my cousins and siblings. But no, it was a really cool, I would say, a cool opportunity to be part of that community and just to kind of grow up around it. You know, when you're that young, you don't really know any different, right? But to have the chance to be around, you know, particularly growing up in Pittsburgh and around the Penguins, to see that whole journey, right? And it's not all the glamour that everyone thinks it is and sees. You know, there are the injuries, there are the trades, there's, you know, just bad seasons, right? And bad performing teams and just ups and downs of sports generally. So I think having that kind of experience before kind of taking my own competitive journey on was really helpful, and just to kind of set the stage and set the foundation a little bit to think about, you know, hey, this is not, you know, it's not all it's not an easy path, right? And to really take that on was I think really helpful.
What are some of the lessons you learned from your uncle about managing money? I'm sure you paid attention to that. He had a very good career when it came to earnings. What did you learn by watching him?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because it's something we actually incorporate now into how we're out there educating athletes, right, around money and at every level. But it's really just kind of the CEO mindset, right? And it's really being familiar and involved with everything that's happening around your money. But that doesn't necessarily mean needing to be the expert, right? And that's really something that I took away from him as somebody who was a great mentor of mine. You know, not only on the ice, but just generally speaking as a human, right? And how to surround yourself with good people, people who are smarter than you are, people who are thinking productively. And so I think that was really helpful. And I was listening to one of your shows with Terry Bradshaw. So as a Pittsburgher myself, it was great to see and great to listen to him. But you know, he had the same mentality of, you know, it's sometimes you or most of the time surrounding yourself with the right people makes a huge difference. And that can ultimately be the difference between, you know, ultimately being successful in life and with money and not.
Yeah, I mean, Terry talked about being the creator, and he's kind of the quarterback of the situation, but you have to have good people on your team who understand the nitty-gritty of how to run business or manage your money. And that's where your Athlete Center of Excellence comes in. You've got 9 members on this team. Maybe you could talk about that, because the members on this team, talk about a dream team of people that you've assembled to help guide people and lend their input, people who have done it at the highest levels, not only on the court and on the field, but also in business. Let's talk about that a little bit.
No, it's been I would say it's just been a really special opportunity to be involved in this whole initiative, right? And we'll call it just our whole commitment from JP Morgan Chase to athletes, and being just a really genuine and authentic resource for all athletes at every step of their careers, right? That they can tap into, whether they have accounts at JP Morgan Chase or not. And I think that's really for me personally, as well as a company, I think it's really important for us to show up the right way with athletes, because as we know, it's a very delicate, it's a sensitive community to be part of. So I think that's the only real way to approach this, to really build lasting relationships, to show up the right way. But you're right, like the council is the way we're looking at them and just these obviously highly reputable and very successful people in their sports, right? We're looking at them as our advisory board, right? And at the firm level at JP Morgan Chase, it's a big company, a lot of different touch points, a lot of connectivity within sports, within athletes, right? And really leaning on these individuals for their perspectives, their experiences, not only for themselves, but for, teammates that they've seen, and others that they've other things that they've all seen throughout their careers. And we've got the likes of Tom Brady, Dwyane Wade, who are obviously household names when it comes to their respective sports and just athletes broadly. And then we've got current players like Asia Wilson and Kayvon Thibodeaux, who were almost basically right in the shoes of a lot of these NIL athletes now in the university, at the university level, in the college level. So we've got a really good mix, and it's been really, I would say, just enlightening and refreshing to see their perspectives, to see how they, I would say, look back and what they pass along in terms of just perspective, and how we can show up as a financial services industry for athletes.
I'm imagining like this big boardroom with all these athletes and you around the table. Are you having like quarterly meetings? Is this more of a one-on-one thing where you're tapping into them? If you have an athlete who comes to you and says, hey, I'm interested in learning more about financial literacy, you're able to connect them with one of these athletes. Give us a little detail on how this works.
Yeah, the way we have it kind of set up now is we are leaning on these athletes for their perspectives, right? So we do kind of anticipate, or we have a regular cadence of touch points of just making sure that we're communicating with them in terms of, our first meeting was in March, and I had the pleasure, the privilege to join that meeting and really to be in the room to hear their perspectives. And it was a very candid conversation, right? It's not just, hey, these are all, high profile people, let's get them in a room. Like, they had really good stuff to share. And, I think the idea is we will implement their thoughts, their perspectives, and then go back to them with, hey, here's what we heard, right? Here's what you told us. Here's what we've implemented. Now tell us more, right? And give us some feedback. Is this the right direction that we're going? How can we continue to improve and just refine everything that we're doing? And then ultimately how we ultimately deliver on these perspectives and these insights, Brian, is through our Athlete Center of Excellence. Or one of the ways that we deliver on those insights is through our Athlete Center of Excellence, where we are making sure that through our advisors, through everyone in JP Morgan Chase who has the opportunity to work with athletes, either they're already working with athletes, they want to work with athletes, they have connectivity to universities, teams, players associations, whatever it is. That's one way that we're able to help support and get these perspectives out to the athlete community, right? And so that's it's really making sure that we're leaning on them for that advice, taking that advice in, and then ultimately delivering on it.
I want to talk about financial literacy for a minute. Like you mentioned a couple minutes ago, now you could be a high school athlete earning name, image, and likeness money. The requirement for financial literacy starts so much earlier than like when Terry Bradshaw was taken number one in the 1970 NFL draft. A lot of high school kids, I think back to when I was in high school, I wouldn't have been able to manage large sums of money probably without some assistance. So it seems like, a company like yours, you're working with younger and younger athletes now to get them on board with, this is something you should be paying attention to. Because a lot of these athletes, frankly, Mik, they sign agreements. They don't know what they're signing. They find themselves paying more taxes than they thought they would, or they've signed away rights that they didn't think they signed away. There's a lot of education that needs to take place around this.
There is. And that's the main thing of why ACE, the Athlete Center of Excellence, why my group and our group exists, is really to get that education, to get that awareness out there, and really be a net giver in this space, right? That's why we exist. And being out and doing this more and more, I almost take it as a personal mission now to get this information out there, right? And I consider to have a very unique background in the hockey world, right? Growing up around it, playing at a high level, being having an uncle and a father who played in the NHL. All that said, though, the topic of good money habits was, not necessarily always part of the conversation, right? And as I don't think it's really become a normal part of the conversation up until very recently, right? With the NIL, at least openly talked about within the athlete community. So I think that's part of the thing that what drives me every day to get out into the world and really spread this awareness. And you mentioned, the younger athletes now. I would say it's as athletes, we're not necessarily prone to make decisions and to do things or to take action until we really need to, right? And that's even more so the case with money, and it's more so because we just don't know what we don't know, especially at an early age, right? And that's just human nature. So what we're trying to do is get out, do these sessions with not only athletes but their parents, their coaches, their trusted people around them, right? To start to get the message out, the resources out, so that they can start to just at least the very least familiarize themselves, know where to go when it does become time to again make those decisions and to take action. Because that's I think the biggest piece is it's human nature. It's easy to not do anything and not take action when you don't know what to do, right? So that's really what we're trying to do, is bridge that gap.
I saw an interesting story this week that I wanted to talk about during this conversation. Arch Manning supposedly is giving away, donating to charity, his $4.1 million that he's earning from NIL money. Great. I was kind of torn on this. I'm like, great that he's giving it to charity. What a noble gesture. But then, you're assuming that you're going to earn more money in the future. And if you get hurt, now you've given away your $4.1 million and you might not have the same earning potential if you're hurt in the future. How do you help athletes make those decisions? Because those are really difficult decisions.
I mean, at the end of the day, money is a very personal thing, right? Yeah. And yes, there are broad rules of thumb and broad things and advice areas that we can pass along, right? In terms of budgeting, saving, building credit, investing for the future, using money as a tool to build and not just as a tool to spend, right? But at the end of the day, everyone has their own relationship with money. Everyone has their own values when it comes to money and how to use it. And I think it's a very personal decision. And that's what we try and do, is really get that education out there of, depending on what you want to do, show them the consequences of different decisions, right? Because at the end of the day, as advisors, as any type of mentor advisor to anyone really, our job is not to tell people what to do, right? And it's really to educate them while advising, and then talk them through the different consequences of decisions, right? And so that they can ultimately see, okay, well, if I do this, here's what I'm giving up, right? If I spend if I spend $50K or $100K on a nice car now as a college athlete, it's not just the price tag that I'm giving up, right? It's that potential future appreciation of instead investing that money, right? And the same way of but also I'm giving up, if I decided to invest, I'm giving up the joy of buying something now, right? So it's decisions, it's understanding the consequences of those decisions, and that's really what we're trying to do. Is if you want to give $4 million to charities, by all means, more power to you. But that again, it's just I think a personal decision, and we're just trying to arm people with the resources and the knowledge to make the best decisions for them.
Do you find with young athletes, are you dealing with their parents? Are you dealing with agents? Are you dealing with them directly? I find the older the athlete, the more they're in charge and empowered to make their own decisions. I've kind of learned with young athletes, someone may sign a deal with a private jet company because they think it's cool to take the private jet, but they don't know that you're going to get taxed on the flights. And now you've got financial planners or parents going, wow, we owe a lot of money in taxes because of those private flights.
No, it's very true. I would say the younger, we definitely try and get more involvement from the parents and other we'll call them personal stakeholders and personal mentors of the younger athletes, because that's ultimately that we found who has the most, at least, more willingness to learn and to try and set themselves up the right way around this stuff at the onset. Right. So it's really having those conversations again with the parents, the agents, if there are, if they have one, the coach, any close coaches around them, and really just start to set the foundation early. And you're right that I think as athletes progress in the journey, and now it's even younger, but as they get into the later stages of NIL and if they make it to the next level of the pros, right, usually they start to have some sort of team, they start to have that team, they start to have those habits kind of built in of spending habits. If they have a good investment habit, that's something that will carry through, to the next level. If they haven't quite started that investing habit, it's going to be a little bit tougher, I think, to really get that ingrained into the overall, let's call it, financial infrastructure, right? But it's really trying to set the foundation early, talk about this stuff early in a way that resonates with them, right? And in a way that resonates, if it's football, talking about things in a way that resonates with football, right? And just like other sports, same way. But at the end of the day, it's really just making sure that we're doing right by the athletes and the people that they rely on and building their team around them.
One of my favorite financial stories, Rob Gronkowski, supposedly he never touched the principal of what he earned from his NFL career. He lived off of his endorsement money and was very responsible, didn't drive a fancy car, things like that. He learned that early on. What's the biggest mistake that you see athletes today making who aren't as disciplined as Rob Gronkowski?
A lot of people, a lot of people refer them as mistakes, right? But I rather think athletes, we don't know what we don't know, right? We train for the game, we don't train for the money. And so I think it's just, instead of referring to as a mistake, it's just understanding what's possible, right? So a lot of times what we'll do is show them, hey, you could, if you're making X amount, and by the way, this doesn't even apply to just athletes, this is for anyone, right? If you make X amount of money, right, you could invest half of it like Rob did. You could invest 90% of it, or you could invest 5% of it. Here's what we can expect that to do over the long run, right? And here's where you'll be in 10, 20, 30 years from a financial perspective. Which one do you most align with, right? Which one is one that you feel really compelled to go toward, right? And we can help you take the right steps. But a lot of times it's really, I would say it's, as athletes, it's delayed gratification. We understand that as well as anyone in terms of training and doing trusting the process, doing the things we need to do to be the best athletes that we can be. Now, how do we take those same principles to our money, right? And I think there's a lot of social influences out there with social media and just wanting to show off a little bit and wanting to just to enjoy the money a little bit. And a lot of times what we'll talk about is it's okay to do that, right? But let's be responsible with balancing, right? How do we use this money now, enjoy it now, but also use it as a tool to build for the future?
One of the things I've learned from hosting this show for 22 years, athletes are competitive in business too, not just on the field of play. When I worked for the Blazers and I was in the locker room, it was more about investing in restaurants, investing in clothing companies, investing in record labels, all very high risk businesses. Now it seems like, athletes are investing in media companies and they're really thinking through what they're investing in a lot more than they did 20 years ago. I think that's a lot because of people like yourself and the center that you're a part of.
Absolutely. And, I see it. I'm on the ground level. I'm in locker rooms almost weekly, right? I'm on a plane and we're visiting with teams. We just wrapped up kind of a 3-week NIL road or 3-month NIL roadshow tour with Kayvon Thibodeaux, who's on our athletes council. And, we're in the rooms with, in this case, the football community, and they want to know, they want to learn, they want to get familiar around this stuff. It's just finding the right resources to start that journey. And you mentioned, like a lot of times, especially in the pro locker rooms, there's different, we'll call them investment opportunities that a lot of times sound really good. And our advice around that is, if it sounds too good to be true, usually it is. Right. And we're not, again, just trying to think, how do we, if we decide that it makes sense that we want to participate in a certain investment that sounds really good, let's just size it appropriately. Right. And make sure that we're not going to lose it, all of our money if for whatever reason it doesn't go the way we think. Right. So it's just doing things a certain way, setting things up a certain way, and just kind of talking through just kind of general rules of thumb. Right. A lot of times that what comes up as one of the top questions that we get is, I've had I've had a lot of support from my family. Now that I'm in the position of making money now, I want to support the ones who've supported me,
Mhm.
right? There are others who are coming out that I'm just not quite sure, or it's not something that I really want to entertain, right? But I don't want to. I want to preserve that relationship, right? And how do I say no without saying no? And so that's what we give them tips and we give them ideas to think about that. And usually the most straightforward, the best thing is really to kind of put a wall up between you and your money. And whether that's mom and dad, whether that's an advisor, whether that's somebody who a second set of eyes, that somebody, if they ask you, hey, can you help me out with something, or do you want to invest in this? It's, the default answer can be, hey, I actually don't have access to it right now. I'll have to check with my guy, or I'll have to check with mom. Right. And so it's just putting frameworks and systems around money so that, at the end of the day, so that we can ultimately just take this opportunity and really take advantage of it.
Such an important point that you make, because there is that trust level with family, but family usually isn't the financial expert. And it is hard for a lot of athletes, and they trust their family, and their family doesn't manage their money the right way. So, I think one of the lessons from this conversation, and probably from your center, is have someone who knows what they're doing as that other set of eyes that you can check in with, and that can even be the bad guy and just say, you know what? Call my financial advisor. They can say no to the family or to the many requests that the athlete is getting. But I think that's a really important point that you make.
No, and it's true. And something that comes to mind too is in one of our sessions in the last couple of weeks, what came up was this kind of dynamic of, right, particularly for those higher profile sports, right? What fans see and what potentially not super close family or friends see is this character, right, that you play as an athlete, and you're suited up every Sunday, every Saturday for college, and particularly for football, right? They see this character, but athletes are humans too, right? And it's really, again, trying to take this unique capital window, this unique opportunity as athletes, who are typically, on the younger side. And just that's the unique thing about being a competitive athlete is you're typically younger in age. There's an unknown capital window, how long you're going to be able to make money from being an athlete, right? So everything that we can do to put a system around ourselves, our money, to really take advantage and do the right things, even the smallest things, the simplest things are going to make a big difference. And that's really what we try and talk about is, the character that everyone sees and everyone thinks is great, making all this money, cut that money in half almost for taxes, depending on how much it is, add in an agent fee, add in other things, right? And it's not quite yes, it's still a great living. Yes, it can be very powerful, but it's not, behind the curtain, it's not always what everyone thinks, right? And that's really what we talk about is, athletes are humans too. And it's really just making sure that that they do the right things to preserve what they want to preserve.
We've got just a couple minutes left. The other thing that you've done so well is you've been a part of the Mario Lemieux Foundation. It's been around for 35 years. You've raised millions and millions of dollars. There's a lot of athletes now who want to leave a legacy. They want to start a foundation. They want to do good in the world, but not all of them know how to start a foundation. Who should be part of the foundation? How much money should I set aside to start the foundation? And again, Mario Lemieux Foundation is one of the best athlete-run foundations in the history of sports, been around for 35 years. What advice do you give to athletes when they come to you and say, I want to start a foundation, or I want to do good in the world and I need to set a certain amount of money aside to do that?
I think it starts with just personal mission, personal values, right? That's where any philanthropic endeavor starts, right? And for my uncle Mario and my aunt Natalie, his wife, that was a very personal thing that had them start this foundation, right? My uncle had battled cancer in his 20s. My cousin Austin was born prematurely, and they had two young daughters. And so I would say the missions and the ventures that they've done through that foundation really started from a personal perspective. And what they wanted to do was really provide for the masses right? The support who were for people going through those similar experiences. And what they've done is they've created playrooms, right, at very many hospitals for siblings, right, to go and play and be kids while their other siblings are getting treatment for whatever they might be getting treatment for at the hospital, right? And so that's been really impactful to see, and just to be part of that, to continue that legacy and to continue that mission, right, has been really important and valuable to me and our entire family. But for athletes in particular, I would say the biggest thing is just what's your personal mission, right? And it doesn't sometimes, usually, starting your own private foundation is not the first step to do it, right? It is getting involved with an existing foundation that has a mission that feels that important to you, that you want to get behind, right? Or giving back to underserved community, the next generation of athletes, right? And it's just making sure that what you're doing, getting involved in the community and in whatever space that you want to give back to that matters to you, just start small, just like anything else, right? Just like athletes don't get in the professional locker rooms overnight, right? You start somewhere. Same with investing, same with money, same with philanthropy, right? And charity. And it just starts with getting involved where you can. And then as different things happen and you get connected to the right people and the more momentum happens, then you can, start to think about a private foundation. But there are a lot of things that go into a private foundation. It's not just putting your name on it and saying, okay, here we go.
Yeah, that's for sure. If someone's listening to this or watching this and they want to get in touch with the Athlete Center of Excellence, they need some help navigating financial literacy, what's the best way for them to do that?
apmorgan.com/ACE, ACE. And that's, that is our athlete education hub. That's where, all of our articles are, our checklist, everything is there for athletes at every step of the way, at every stage, and their families and the folks around them to get educated, to get familiar with this stuff. There's a way to reach out to us directly, right on that website. So I would say that's really where we guide most of our athletes in the sessions that we do. And we're happy to meet with anyone and just really be a support system for all athletes at every step of the way.
Mik Lemieux, he's the executive director and wealth planner on the Athlete Center of Excellence team with JP Morgan Wealth Management. Thanks so much for joining me on Sports Business Radio. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you, Brian.